Thank you for joining us for today's Family Academy. Today's session is the occupation of being a student. And just wanting to give us a little bit of quick orientation to Zoom in case this is a fairly new experience for you. When you look at your Zoom screen, if you would like to unmute yourself to ask a question or to join in the conversation at some point, you can choose that. You can click where the microphone is. If you'd like to change your speaker view, you can do that in the top right corner here, where you can change it so that you're just seeing the speaker and the slides, or you can change it to gallery view. For changing your name, you click over these three dots near the top of your own picture, and you can rename yourself if you'd like to. Feel free, please, to enter comments into the chat box as we move through the session, and you're welcome to do that at any time. Family Academy is a place where families and the school district build a stronger partnership to support our students. We're so thankful to have families here today. If you have questions during the presentation, we're asking that you enter them in the chat box. And what that does is that helps our presenters to have a little bit of think time and to determine if the question is going to be answered sort of naturally through the presentation, or if they need to add some specific details in for you. And let me introduce our panelists today. We have three occupational therapists in our district: Cammie Miller, Michelle Smith, Sarah Buchholz. Thank you so much. And then also Caitlin Griffin, our STEM coordinator, is going to share some activities with us as well. And with that, I think we're ready to get started. Sarah, thank you.
It's nice to see everyone today. We're just grateful we get to be here and give some helpful information to our community. I'm just going to give you a little bit of a heads up about how we're going to move with this presentation. The three of us are just going to kind of go in a cyclical format throughout the presentation, taking a turn each. We wanted to bring to you some fun ways to promote learning and fine motor skill development at home. And if there's teachers there, it looks like there might be some teachers with your students too as well. You can take some of these activities at home as well. Which brings us to our next slide. There are certain foundational skills that need to happen in development so that other skills can happen. And this was just a good quote, we thought, to illustrate that. For example, the first one, your child can learn to write. Before they learn to write, they have to be able to hold the pencil correctly. And then the next three activities are the same thing. It's just illustrating how you need to have certain foundational skill sets before you can build on them and be successful with that. With that, we also wanted to, can you move back up a little, one more, Mary? We wanted to emphasize that with all skill development and progression and growth with kids, they're all unique. They're all uniquely made and happen on their timeline, not necessarily our timeline. And so it's not fair to compare kids to each other, but just to take that kid as to who they are and their experiences and how many experiences they've had in different skill sets. I have a good story with this. My youngest, when she was 3, went to preschool. I went in for the first parent-teacher conference, and they told me that they didn't have any concerns except for some fine motor skills. I'm like, oh, really? What are they? And basically it came down to that they gave her scissors to cut out a shape, and it was just a hack job. And I'm like, well, I've never given her scissors before for some very good reasons. But I also had to look back and take my own advice that I give parents, and that is you need to expose your kid to tasks. You need to give them a chance to develop these tasks and activities to help them, to come alongside them so they can develop that. And hopefully this presentation will give you some activities that you can do with your kids. That's all to say is that everybody with their rate of exposure and different things, different skills all develop at different rates. Okay, Marie. In our presentation, we have three main objectives. We want to look over those basic building blocks, those foundational skill sets for fine motor development. And then we want to give you some examples to get your child's brain and body ready for learning and fine motor success, especially within this at-home learning environment we find ourselves in, and then to describe how to set up your child's learning space for success as well. So some ideas you can have at home and at school when they come back to school as well. So occupational therapists wear many hats outside of the school setting. We delve into lots of different skill sets and lots of different areas, but within this, in the school setting, we mainly look at fine motor, gross motor, visual perceptual, sensory processing, and executive functioning skills, and how those skills help that student do their job of being a student. We just wanted to give you an idea of what we look at and where we're going today. And we're going to just pull out one of those skill sets specifically, and that's fine motor. Now I'm going to pass it off to Cami, and she's going to go over why fine motor skills are important and what they are.
Hello, thanks, Sarah. So why are fine motor skills important? So fine motor skills really help your child to participate in those meaningful everyday tasks that are listed here, and allow them to complete their job as their role as a student and as a person. And these tasks really affect our daily routines, and practicing these skills can really be integrated into kind of your everyday life tasks. And I did want to highlight that recently I read a study from the American Journal of Occupational Therapy, and they have found that elementary students spend between 37.1 and 60.2% of the school day performing fine motor activities. And I thought that really highlighted the frequency of fine motor skills that a student performs within their daily routine. All right. So what exactly are fine motor skills? They are the ability to make those precise and accurate movements using the small muscle groups in your wrist, in your hand, and in your fingers. And as noted in the previous slide, they can include all of those everyday tasks. So let's go ahead and we'll take a look at a video here that talks a little bit more about what fine motor skills are. And then it also explains the difference between what fine motor skills and gross motor skills are.
Many parents are often confused about the difference between gross motor skills and fine motor skills. Gross motor skills are when children learn to make movements with all of their muscles and joints. So it's things like walking, crawling, running, jumping, climbing, anything that they need to use all of their muscles and limbs in a coordinated way. Oftentimes, gross motor skills are related to their core strength. So how strong their trunk muscles are, can they sit up straight, do they have good control and coordination to run and jump and climb and do that in a way that is coordinated. Fine motor skills are built on your gross motor skills. Often, in order to have good quality, strong fine motor skills, you need to have solid gross motor skills. So for fine motor skills, we're looking at things like how children hold their pencil. Are they able to cut with scissors? Do they hold their utensils properly when they're eating? So it's really how they use the smaller muscles in their hands to coordinate doing more precise and accurate motions. If your child has difficulty with gross motor skills, some ways to help improve their gross motor skills is sometimes to involve them in community activities. Many children like to participate in swimming, they do karate, they play soccer, they find activities in their community that can help them work on building their core muscle strength and their coordination. If kids have difficulty with their fine motor skills, there's many things that you can do as a parent to help improve them. Sometimes it's sitting down and playing a board game, playing with toys, finding an arts and crafts activity that really works on them using those smaller muscles of their hands to do something that's really fun. Some children may have poor coordination. They may have difficulty with their fine motor skills, but it really comes down to their function and how much it differs than other kids who are the same.
All right, so on to the next slide.
Many parents are often confused.
All right, thanks, Mary. So as mentioned in the video, gross motor skills develop first, and they really are the building block for fine motor skills. And as it shows in this graphic here, the developmental progression from a child's ability to use their trunk and how this continues to the controlled use of their fingers. And an example developmentally is that babies learn to sit up and crawl before they start to develop the ability to use that fine pincer grasp to pick up small objects, like picking up a Cheerio off of a tray. All right, so this next slide looks more specifically at upper extremity development, and it starts at the top there. So it starts with shoulder stability. And a child first develops that shoulder stability through weight bearing when they're crawling or when they're on their tummies, kind of propped on their elbows. And then from there, you start to see the elbow and the forearm rotation happen. So kids start to reach for toys, they're holding a bottle, bringing it to their mouth, they're clapping, they're banging, all of those things you're starting to see moving from like this into kind of a neutral, or what we call an open or supinated position. And for most fine motor tasks that involve the controlled use of the hand, the forearm is going to be in that partially open or neutral position. And a good example of that is with cutting with scissors. So when we cut with scissors, we have our hand in more of this kind of neutral position, thumbs up. It's a lot more difficult when we turn it and try to cut thumbs down. You have less control of those fingers. The next building block there is wrist stability. And stability refers to keeping other body parts still, like the wrist, so that others can move, like the fingers. So again, you initially gain that wrist stability through strengthening the wrist muscles when kids are weight bearing and crawling. And really, in order to complete those fine motor tasks, the wrist needs to be positioned in a slightly extended position, or a kind of a neutral position. So flat is kind of neutral, and then we've got a little bit of extension here at the wrist. And if you take a look, if you're trying to hold something, you typically are going to hold with a little bit more of that that extended position. It's way more difficult if you try to hold something with the flexed or hooked position of the wrist. I have way more control and mobility of my fingers when I'm in a more extended position right here. And so really all of these building blocks need to be in place again before we get to that bottom box there, that is the fine motor movements. And once those building blocks are in place, then kids can really start to do grasp and release activities, manipulate objects, hold a spoon, fasten buttons, hold a pencil, kind of all those functional fine motor skills. All right, now I'm going to pass it off to Michelle, and she's going to be talking a little bit more about fine motor development.
Okay, thank you, Cami, and hello, everyone. So over the next few slides, we have provided some activities that you can do at home with your child to help with development of fine motor skills. The activities have been organized based on the child's age and also what area or skill that we're trying to develop. So before I get into the activities, I want to go through this this slide with you and the topics real quick. So when we're talking about whole arm activities, this refers to anything basically from the shoulder down to the fingertips. What we're looking to try and develop is motion. So think of reaching activities or strength and stability in that upper arm for like pushing and pulling. With whole hand, we're working on really trying to develop the muscles in the hand in order for them to make a grip. And then the next two, we're going to start to try to isolate the fingers so that they're moving a little bit more independently. So the pincer grasp involves the thumb and the index finger. And we need this grasp in order to help with buttoning or with picking up small objects. And then the functional tripod grasp, which is the thumb, index finger, and the middle finger. And that's what we use to hold or stabilize our pencil when we're writing. Okay, so now we're going to talk about some whole arm activities. Okay. As we discussed earlier in the presentation, children learn through play. So you want to make the activities exciting and fun for them, so they'll want to do it. A great whole arm activity for younger children is crawling. They're motivated and excited when they hear their parents' voice, cheering for them. And it's also intrinsically motivating for them because they get to go around and explore their environment. Another whole arm activity that I have my children do, especially in this cold weather or when it's raining, is I give them a bunch of blankets or sheets, and I have them, and then they rearrange my living room to make these really cool forts. They're having fun, and they're getting that upper arm development, strength and stability. Whenever they're putting a blanket over a chair, they're working on that motion. When they're crawling through the tunnels, they're working on the stability and strength in their shoulder. So it's a really great activity to do with children at home if you're looking for something. Sports, again, wonderful activity to include the whole body, not just the whole arm. And then another great activity that you can do no matter what age your child is, and it's really helps with not only upper body, but your whole body and your mind and body connection that we'll talk later on, is yoga. Okay, so let's talk about whole hand activities. Again, our focus is trying to develop the muscles in the hand in order for your child to make a grip, to hold objects. As you can see, a lot of these activities are not expensive. You have them at home. And one of a favorite one that toddlers and younger children enjoy doing is scooping and dumping objects. So take cups and maybe put them in the bath for bath time and have them scooping up water and dumping it. If you're outside, have them get dirty, dig in that sand and making, scooping up sand or dirt and making piles. For older children, lately, since we've been home a lot, we have been doing something, we're trying to look for something different that we haven't been doing. We've done board games and everything. And we started to do some woodworking. And they have made many, many birdhouses. This is the first one. We have a lot of them. And I'm not sure why they're so motivated to making tons of birdhouses. Perhaps it's the fact that I usually don't allow them to use tools. But while they're having fun, they're working on developing the strength in their hands when they're gripping the hammer, when they're hammering, when they're using a screwdriver, or even when they're painting too. So if you're kind of in a rut, try to think of maybe expose your child to something totally different that they haven't done before. Okay, and now we're going to start, again, the next 2 slides we'll start talking about ways to try and isolate the fingers so that way they're moving a little bit independently. So how do we do this? The pincer grasp. Find an activity that your child is really interested in, and then you want to challenge them. So for instance, toddlers and younger children love to draw. So they haven't really developed the strength in their hands yet and the dexterity. So you want to use markers that are bigger, like thicker, so that they have a little bit, so they can hold it. When they start getting older and you can see that they're holding it a little bit better, moving their fingers, making more purposeful movements on the paper. Challenge them by using a marker that's a little bit thinner, as you can see, in diameter. Your child's not going to get it the first time around, but just continue to expose them to it. Even if it's for a few minutes, try it. They get frustrated, go back, and just keep working on that skill. Another great activity for all age groups is, they mentioned board games. Start off with pieces that have larger, start off with games that have larger pieces, such as Jenga. Jenga is a good one. And also like checkers or Connect 4. They're bigger pieces and they have more area to grab onto. And then when you start seeing they're able to kind of move it in their hand, a little bit more control, they're putting in the slot instead of like fumbling around, try and introduce them to an activity that has smaller pieces. I like Battleship, for instance, because you have these small pieces where they really have to use that pincer grasp. and then they have to put it into the hole, into a slot. Okay, and then we are going to be discussing functional grasp activities. Now, I know in my previous slides, I'm talking about fun, exciting games, but your children are learning to develop these, develop fine motor skills through everyday activities, through eating, through bathing, through dressing. So with your younger child, have them, instead of just throwing on their coat, maybe have them try and work on trying to put on their coat. They're working that whole arm, then you could engage the zipper and have them work on trying to zip it up. Tying shoes is wonderful. Or even around this time, have them help you with making a bow on the presents. And then a great activity that you can do for the whole entire family is meal prep. Have your older children help with chopping things. Your school-age children, have them, they can work on peeling. And then even your toddler and preschooler, get them involved, and they can help with salad prep, tearing up the lettuce into small pieces. So I know that these are just a few activities, and we have additional resources at the end of the presentation if you would like some more suggestions. So now I'm going to hand it off to Sarah that will be talking about getting your child's brain and body connected. Thanks.
Thank you, Michelle. Michelle went over some really good examples that you can use at home. And now to prep that space and to prep that area and to prep that child's body and mind so that they can engage in the most successful way they can. That's what we're going to talk about next. And there's 4 main areas. The first one is the zones of regulation, which is basically a social emotional tool that's been adopted by the district to help kids. And we're picking this one because it's one that a lot of kids know that if they've been in the school the last year or so, they've heard the vocabulary, and we want to introduce it to parents so that they can use that vocabulary too and those ideas as well to get the brain and body ready to learn. And then we're going to do some warm-up exercises and talk about setting your learning space up at home and gathering materials. So the first one, the zones of regulation. I'm just going to briefly describe this. If you would like a more in-depth description, the Family Academy presentation on social emotional learning tools is an excellent place to start. They go a little more in depth into what the zones of regulation are. But basically, it's a systemic cognitive behavioral approach that teaches self-regulation along with some co-regulation from some adults to show the kids, hey, these are emotions, they're all okay, and these are where they fit more into more of an objective standard into these 4 colors. And once they ID their emotions, they can know how to play with those emotions during different activities, such as if I'm in blue and I'm in the blue zone and I'm tired and I'm not ready to learn yet, oh, maybe I can go do some jumping jacks before I have to learn. It'll wake me up a little bit. And you just work with your kids on just different tools they can use so they can get into the zone they need to be in to learn. So given that, we're going to go on to the next slide where Cammie's going to go and describe some warm-up exercises.
All right. Thank you, Sarah. So after you do your zone check-in with your child or your student, it's a nice time for them to be able to choose an activity. And we've kind of broken these activities up into kind of waking up the whole body and then kind of waking up the hands and the arms. So studies have shown that exercise before learning tasks really does improve performance, and even just a small burst of exercise, even if it's only like 5 minutes before learning, can really help to focus the areas of the brain needed for higher level tasks. In the reference section at the end, we do have an article linked if you want to learn a little bit more about that as well. And I think it's super important right now too in remote learning because we're not moving as much. We're in front of the computer, and you don't have those natural transitions throughout the day that a student would typically have, moving from lunch to recess. Or moving from class to class. So again, it's just really important to try to get those movement activities integrated within the routine. All right, so next slide goes more specifically into what those warm-up exercise could look like. So again, the whole body warm-ups, they could include following along with an online video like Go Noodle for elementary students. They have all sorts of different things you can choose from guided dance to mindfulness to yoga, all sorts of different things. And then for middle or high school students, Fitness Blender has some good videos too, more exercise-based. Even just getting outside just for 5 or 10 minutes to do a walk around the block or ride your bike, just something to kind of reset the brain. And in your house, you can do jumping jacks, wall push-ups, all sorts of different things you can do. More specifically for hand and arm warm-ups, you can just do simple things like finger taps, kind of isolating those fingers, pencil jacks, like you're holding a pencil and then you're kind of going in and out like this. Also ball squeezes. So if you have a ball, any ball, tennis ball, whatever it is, squeezing like 10 times each side, or you can just do the fingertips. Getting those small muscles of the hands all warmed up and ready for fine motor activities or school tasks. Another thing you can do is just to have kind of a bin of different things and have your student pick out something to use. It's always fun to have a choice. I've got all sorts of things in here. I've got Legos and stickers, all sorts of different things. One of my favorites is Play-Doh. You can do all sorts of things with Play-Doh. Even just opening Play-Doh is a good fine motor task to get it open. You can incorporate imaginative play into this, rolling out the Play-Doh, making a pizza, pretending to make a pizza, doing small little balls with your fingers and then squishing them. So all sorts of fun things you can do with Play-Doh. Another thing for younger kids that's fun is doing songs that have finger movements. So Itsy Bitsy Spider. If that's hard, you can just do kind of this movement. Open, shut them. Where is Thumpkin? So really isolating those fingers while having fun doing a song. All right, and I think Michelle's up next with setting up the learning space.
Okay, thank you, Cami. Okay, so we're in the last section of our presentation, and we're going to look at ways to prepare your child a space for them to learn. So we'll look at positioning. We'll look at how the chair, how they're sitting in the chair, and also position of the paper. We'll look at flexible seating options. So giving them a choice, not just sitting at a chair, but other ways that they can do the activities while being supported. Changing the work surface, going from a horizontal to a vertical plane. And then where does the activity take place? It doesn't necessarily need to take place at a desk or a chair. We're going to offer some suggestions on what you can do inside and outside the home. And then gathering and setting up materials. Finding a way to organize your materials so that way when your child or you're ready to do an activity, you're not running around searching, you just grab it and go. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to talk about is positioning. Okay, so when you're thinking about doing an activity, most of the time you're probably going to be sitting at either a desk or a table. I know at my house, I don't have ergonomically correct chair for my child. He's sitting in a chair that's meant for an adult. But with a few modifications, we can provide some support so that they're sitting upright and they're in a good position for learning. Okay, so we're gonna start from the bottom up. So your child's sitting in this chair, and depending on how old they are, their feet might be dangling a little bit. Well, the problem with that is it adds a lot of strain to your lower back, and also it's not a good support system. So when your child's trying to do an activity and they don't have a good support, they're leaning this way, kind of not in a comfortable position. So an inexpensive way to kind of fix this is just grab some, if you have some big books, put them underneath their feet, or I'm sure that some of us have some Amazon boxes lying around that we can use. Just make sure that the surface is flat and that their ankles, knees, and also their hips are at 90 degrees. Okay, so their base is supported, but they're slouching a little bit. Another quick fix is just put some pillows behind them, especially make sure their lower back is supported, and have them just in a good position. Head is up and their shoulders relaxed. Okay, so now we're ready to see how to position the paper or activity. Okay. When your child is drawing or doing any activity, first thing I like to do is just kind of take a few deep breaths with them, because a lot of times they're in this position right away. So if you just have them take a few deep breaths, they relax their shoulders. So you want them to have their shoulders nice and relaxed. It can be a little bit in front, and their elbow, as you can see in the slide, is at 90 degrees. And their forearm and their wrist is supported on whatever surface that you're using. And as Cami mentioned, this flex position, a lot of children just normally go into this position. Just remind them, a lot of times all you have to do is just say, oh, can you bring your wrist up? Just a verbal or a visual cue, and your child will just try and mimic you. So just doing that. Another thing, especially for my left-hander, he still does that. So sometimes just adding the paper into a slanted by using a 3-ring binder and having it slope down helps to just kind of relax his wrist and gets him into a good position. But we'll be talking about different surface areas later. Okay, well, flexible seating options. I know myself, sitting in front of the computer, I have to get up and move around. I can't sit there. And the same thing with your children, especially now that we're doing the remote learning. A lot of times they're in this like flex positions. And so we're just going to provide you some options to kind of get them up and extended, pushed back and in a good position. So one suggestion is just take the chair away. Have them stand up while they're doing an activity. But make sure that when they're standing, they're not slouched over, that they're in a good position, head is aligned, everything's aligned, and also they're not throwing out their hip. So just do a few, you might need some cues with them to make sure that they're in a good position. Sometimes your child, after doing activity, after doing schoolwork, and then you want them to do an activity, they're like, oh, no, I don't want to do this. Sometimes you can entice them by saying, hey, come over here and we'll sit on this exercise ball. One, it's fun for them. They're getting, their wiggles out a little bit. And also it's working on your core and trunk muscles too. And they can usually kind of sit there and attend to a task for a little bit. Now, if you are in the market for something, this really cool floor desk Amazon sells is great for children. Just needs a little bit of space. Have your child sit crisscross applesauce, and they have this horizontal surface already positioned great for them. But again, remember, if your child is slouching, just add some pillows to kind of help support them to keep them in a good position. Or if you see that they're slouching a little bit too much, try a different position and go back and just try it for like 5 minutes or so until they build up their strength. And then the last thing, oh, I'm sorry, I have one more, thanks. My older child, he cannot sit in the chair, so he's constantly moving. So we have a bean bag, and he lays on the couch, but his favorite is laying on his stomach. And again, this is a great activity because it gets them out of this flex position and helps with extending, or even lying sideline on the floor too. Any of these seating options is fine. I guess the bottom line is that you want to make sure that they're supported. Use pillows, use cushions, and make sure that their head's in line, they're not flexed too forward or back. And then I'm going to give it to Sarah to talk about work surfaces.
Thanks, Michelle. So I'm going to reiterate some of the things that Michelle has already said, but this is to emphasize just the surface, not necessarily the seating position. And why it's important to go from that flex position that all the kids are in right now over the computer and go into extension is it helps with posture, it helps with support, and it wakes up your brain. Your eyes aren't down and curled into a flex position. They're more in an extension position. So it's not only just the body, it's the head, the neck, the eyes, everything. So lots of different things go into what surface you use. So if you want to spice up the novelty and help that kid interact and engage more, I would change up the surface. There are 3, if you go back, Mary, really quick. There are 3 examples, and Michelle went over almost all of these, which is nice. And this one on the very left where a kid is on his stomach, again, you're getting foundational core support, you're getting support through your elbows, and you're in an extension. You can also tape work on the wall, on the kitchen counter, on an easel. I would say if the child has a hard time controlling their lines and writing, I wouldn't put them in this position because it doesn't give you any support from the elbow down. And the last one on the side is a slant board, again, bringing that from a horizontal to more of a slanted surface. This is a slant board specifically, but again, you can use 3-ring binders. Next slide. Learning space. Changing up your learning space can also increase the variety, increase the novelty. And during asynchronous time or when they're just at home, it helps generalize skill level and generalize just the skill altogether. So if you're having a difficult time pinching things and holding pencils, go to a baking activity that requires dough and requires your child to use little cookie cutters and pick things up and put them down. It makes things novel. It makes things different. It comes out of maybe a frustrating situation that's writing and puts it into another situation that might be more playful and beneficial, and give that motor pathway another way to work and another way to develop. It again, it generalizes skill when you work on buttoning and that sort of thing, getting dressed, promoting independence. All of these things can be worked on in other places, not just in academics and sitting at a desk. You can put it in different places engage in different places in your home and outside. If the weather is good enough and they're up for it, go outside. You can do academics as well as fine motor development outside, picking up leaves, counting, deciding for the older kids, like, well, let's plan our way. Where are we going to go? What streets are we going to use? Use time, all those different kinds of things, incorporate different aspects into it. Next, this is our last major point, and that's gathering and setting and set up your materials. Michelle touched on this. It can be kind of frustrating when you're trying to do school and your stuff isn't there. So if we just get a bucket or a plastic bin like this, a cardboard box, a laundry basket, anything with their name on it, and put their supplies in it. And I'd encourage them to help you do this. One thing that we have done at the beginning of online learning, we gave out a scavenger hunt list to fill a box with. So it'll have pencils, scissors, markers, tissue, paper, what have you. And the kid had to go around his house and mark that off and find that. And that gave him a little more control over what he had. And he's a little more apt to use it then because he picked it out and he got to pick the color or what have you. So it helps with the engagement. Also for older kids, you can make a list of the things they don't have and they need. Can we find it in the house? Can we ask the teacher if she has any extras? Can we go to the store and make a list and a budget and that sort of thing? You can go lots of different ways with this for lots of different ages, just to have those materials set and ready so they don't have to worry about that. And that brings us to almost the end of our presentation. These are the references we used in our information. The next one these are helpful links. The first 2 are Therapy Street for Kids. It's a website made by an occupational therapist, and it has very parent-friendly, teacher-friendly definitions behind lots of different terms in occupational therapy and for fine motor development with lots of different ideas. If you want more ideas than we gave you, you can find them here. They have a good definition and description of posture and why it's important, and other fine motor tools that you can make at home. The last two are two zone references and helpful links. The last one is a zone song. These are both on the flipped resources, where you can just click on them in the flipped resources and they go right to it. Very easy for you to use. The zone song is mainly for little kids though, and it's kind of low audio, low visual, but I've seen it take a whole preschool that's gone wild and calm them down in minutes. And it goes over the zones, and it kind of gives a simplistic definition of how to use them and how to calm yourself down. With this, the additional resources, these are additional resources from our professional, as occupational therapy professional, what do you want to group. They're all backed by peer review process and research, and they have good information in them on play and on building that relationship with your kid in play, and how that's important, and how it's important for learning and developing certain skill sets like fine motor skills. The last two, one's different types of play from the Children's Museum, and the last one are more hand warm-up activities. I wanted to touch base here with Caitlin before we open it up for questions, so that she can describe the STEM resources she has, because they really play right into the things that we were discussing, and they also go into learning.
Thanks, ladies. I learned a lot myself having a 1-year-old daughter. I was like, oh, I could be doing that. I could practice this. Oh, she could do this. So it was really fun. So thank you for sharing that. I am here today just to talk a little bit about STEM resources, specifically some winter themed STEM resources that you could do as a whole family over winter break. Our OTs today talked a lot about these fine motor skills, in particular things like writing or drawing with pencils and paper, coloring. Some of them were involving cutting scissors or using your hands to mold things, build things, cook things, and all of these are actually related to STEM in educational ways. And so I wanted to go ahead and share with you a set of resources that I've put together that you can do as a whole family. So if we go to the Stilicum website on our For Families page, and we navigate to Family Academy, all of our resources are available here. So you can see we have the occupation of being a student. And so all of the resources that our OTs were mentioning today are here, as well as all those clickable resources that they just shared. But on the other side are some STEM resources and STEAM. So if you're unfamiliar with STEAM and STEM, they're basically the same thing. It stands for science, technology, engineering, and math. And sometimes we put in the A in there for science, technology, engineering, art, and math. So there's a couple articles about how you can utilize STEAM and STEM in your home, as well as just a brief overview of what it is and why it's important for our students today. What I really do want to highlight, though, are these winter themed STEAM activities. So I'm going to open this up and show you. So they're categorized by science, technology, engineering, art, and math. And you can just go ahead and click on any of those to get to that particular slide, but I'm just going to walk you through all of them today just really quickly. So the first is science activities. These are just really simple activities with things that are most likely in your home that your students could do with you or with their siblings or independently. So one of them that I think is really fun is making snow crystals. So often here we see ice all the time, right? We hardly ever get actual snow, but we have ice. And so this is kind of, it looks a little bit like it, but it's making crystals out of, I think, borax is the actual thing that is utilized. So it's just like 3 ingredients that maybe one you might have to buy at the store, but the rest you should have. The next one is just a scent activity. So you can engage your nose is olfactory, right? And so you can make little samples of different scents putting like a cinnamon stick in one, or you can put an anise star in another one, and then you can take it out and have like a guessing game, which is kind of fun. And then the last one is a hot chocolate experiment. Again, most of us have hot chocolate or a Nestle's mix in our cabinets. So you can do an experiment. Does hot water versus cold water make hot chocolate work better or worse? Does milk work better than water for the rate of dissolving? So again, just really easy activities with things that you have at home. As we move on to the technology piece, this is pulling in those real fine motor skills again with typing and using your mouse. There's a couple of different challenges here. So you can ask your kids to get onto Google Earth, which is a free program, and they can look for places that have snow. There's a photography or video challenge. So maybe as you're going outside and using your whole body for a walk, you can capture some things that you see in the winter. And then the last two are two different coding activities. So you can use those fine motor skills again to code on technology. Moving on, we have engineering. So these are more building challenges, which again are going to use all those fine motor skills. So things like making snow dough, which is essentially Play-Doh. Or like magic sand, if you're familiar with that. Or you could build a gingerbread house, a snowball catapult, an igloo, or a ski lift. So those are all just different challenges that you can ask your students to do. Again, they are all using things that you should have around your house. Another one is art activities. So 3D paper snowflakes. This uses folding and cutting skills. Again, fine motor movement. Geometric snowman, which you can see over here. It's pretty cool looking, which is really fine folding and intricate folding skills. I'm going to have to try that one myself. And then another coding activity specifically for picture filters, which is cool for our older kids who may use things like TikTok or Instagram or Snapchat, so they can make their own filter. And then finally, we have some math activities. The first one is baking. So we were talking a lot about getting kids involved in cooking and baking, and this is a way you can do it in a winter theme. And then there's a coordinate plane activity, and then just some other activities like a snowball launcher and a geometric tree. So all of the activities that you saw have links to more in-depth directions or recipes or guidelines for the activities. So they are fun for the whole family, and they're all put together for you based on what your child is interested in. And I encourage you this winter break to access them on our Family Academy page. So thank you.
Thank you, OTs, and thank you, Caitlin. I want to make a little bit of time and space. If any of our family members have questions, feel free to enter questions into the chat box or to unmute yourself if you'd like to verbalize your question. As we're kind of giving people an opportunity to enter questions or speak out, I was thinking and kind of recalling back to the story that Sarah told at the beginning of the presentation when the teacher thought that your daughter was behind with her cutting skills. And I was thinking about that because what you said really resonated with me around when you kind of explored that with the teacher, you kind of got a sense of, it's not that my daughter can't do these things, it's that she doesn't have the experiences that have, kind of built those skills up for her. And I was remembering my son who learned to ride a bicycle late. Here I am comparing him to other kids, right? So what I thought was late, and I think he kind of felt like it was late, he was, I think, in the 6th grade when he really started to ride a bike. And of course, at that time, now he's past training wheels, and that's not a thing that's going to happen. And we have to, work that whole thing out. And I was recalling then how guilty I felt when he couldn't ride a bike in 6th grade, and he was feeling badly about himself. And I really appreciate that it was really just a lack of experience for him, because we had just moved from a larger city where you wouldn't, you know, ride your bike around the neighborhood where we lived before, and coming to Steilacoom, which is a much more bike friendly space than where we lived before, he wanted to do that. And so I think that that's just a really, I really appreciate that you kind of clarified that and kind of offered that as a support for us. A lot of times it's in our mindset that we feel that we're experiencing this kind of deficit. And so I really appreciated that. And once he did get some experience and practice, then he was off with his friends, no problem, right? But he just needed to kind of, for me and for him to say, it's okay, I'm learning it, I'm figuring it out now.
That's true. And by the way, when my daughter did learn how to cut, I found her upstairs cutting my great grandmother's hymnal to little tiny squares all over the place. Yeah.
So that's why you kept the scissors away from her.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, thanks for the comment in the chat box, and so glad to see you. And we're just, you know, we just are so lucky to have these awesome OTs who are really supporting all the students in our district and really making sure that educators and families, we all have the information we need to just support our kids. So thanks for that comment. Yes, thanks, Mike. Any other comments, OTs or Caitlin, anything else that you want to add in before we break for the evening?
I think it's really important to emphasize how important it is to do things with play with your kid. All of these things sometimes just come naturally with just natural play. So if it gets too overwhelming and too much, just throw it out the window and just play with your kid.
I think that's a great point, Sarah. I think kids come up with the best activities anyway. If you just give them a few things, they will use their imagination, and you can just build off what they're interested in.
Thank you everyone so much. Families, will stay on for another couple minutes. If you did want to stay and have a question for OTs or for Caitlin, we really appreciate you joining us. And all this video and all the resources will be on our webpage, so you can share with other families or people that you know. Thanks so much.